welcome to the Health Way. After dealing with the deadly virus for over 2 months, the stay-at-home orders in some states are being lifted with certain conditions. Experts believe that we haven't acquired the desired level of the community immunity, what's called, and quite frankly, many people have a compromised immunity, natural immunity, because of the high percentage of the degenerative diseases. So it's important to talk about what we can do to make ourselves stronger to withstand this virus, to survive during these trying times for the whole world. I invited someone whose knowledge and expertise well deserve our attention, my good friend and teacher, Verne Varona. He is an internationally renowned keynote speaker and a frequent guest of many platforms, media platforms. The author of 2 great books, Nature's Cancer Fighting Foods and Macrobiotics for Dummies. He is very gifted in many other areas, yet the best quality about this very talented person is his sense of humor and the way he can make people laugh. Hi, Verne.
Hi.
Welcome to the Health Wave.
Thank you. Thank you for asking me.
I always laugh when I speak with you, and maybe this is not the topic to laugh about, yet a little laughter during this quarantine and lockdown times wouldn't hurt.
Absolutely. I have something to talk about regarding that later.
Well, I wanted to start with a controversial question. There is a lot being talked about developing a population or a community immunity or herd immunity, how they call it. But winning this deadly virus would be impossible unless we develop it, and no one argues with that point. The argument raised is about how to acquire this herd immunity. Given the conditions of this virus, I'll bring a couple of examples. An epidemiologist, Nat Witkowski of the Rockefeller University, he is very firm in his belief that adults and children should be allowed to develop this herd immunity through contracting the disease. They should be allowed to live their normal lives and just get this virus among them while hiding the elders and vulnerable people with other diseases. And on the contrary, scientists from the Johns Hopkins University, they state that the only safe way and effective way to develop this communal immunity would be through vaccinations. So I wanted to ask your opinion on that. Do you see pros and cons in both approach, and what do you think about this?
It's not a new concept, actually. I mean, it goes back to so many different examples. One of the most popular example was during I think it was the late 1800s or early 1900s, Dr. William Coley had created this dead toxin, and this toxin where he would re-inject the toxin, and that would activate immunity to take care and recognize that particular toxin. The idea of, like Bernard Shaw once said, he said, vaccination is giving you a little bit of the disease on purpose so you don't get it accidentally. And he was firmly against vaccinations, but that's what his reply was to vaccination. It's a strange. I hear the word herd, and suddenly I'm here. I'm seeing cows. We don't really have herd. I mean, there is such a thing, and one of the sightings about this was that, one of the reasons kids are becoming more susceptible, supposedly, one theory, to allergies and in a lot of different foods is because they're in sterile environments all the time, or essentially they're not playing in the dirt anymore. They're not, getting sort of bacterial exposure that would automatically activate their immunity. I think there's, that makes sense on a general scale, but immunity is highly individual. That's my take on it. It's highly individual. And the real issue, everybody's talking about immunity. It's like, well, how can you boost immunity? How can you take this? This is immune enhancing. No, this is, you go nuts with all that. First thing is, what is aggravating immunity? We have to look at what are the factors that weaken immunity first. Otherwise, it's putting lipstick on a pig. It's just band-aiding the issue. So let's really look at the larger view about immunity. The immune system is not a system. It's a system, but it's not an organ. It doesn't have a place in the body. It has a housing of white blood cells, and their function is to go through the system like little Pac-Men, and they eat what doesn't belong there, and it goes into their little bag called a lysosome, and it digests it and breaks it down, and that's how your immunity saves you, essentially. So it is important to rectify and to strengthen immunity, but more important, how do you weaken immunity? What are the factors that weaken immunity? So that's what I focus on when I deal with any kind of sickness. The truth is, as I said, immunity is not a single organ. It's a system internally. And what you have to look at is those white blood cells are constantly being threatened by what we eat and how we live and how we feel. Our feelings, that means our stress-related hormones, can influence dramatically our immune function. So people who are chronically depressed or upset have higher recordings of being immunocompromised. People who lack sleep are immunocompromised. If you stay up past 1 o'clock in the morning, and I'm guilty of this frequently, but if you're in a sensitive condition and you stay up late, you're going to lose the benefit of melatonin production, which happens sometime after midnight, 1, 2 a.m., something of that nature. And melatonin is one of the things that can allow you to sleep deeper and produce a better hormone balance. We need that. It also influences immunity. That doesn't mean, like some clients said, well, I just take melatonin and I'm fine. That's questionable as to if that's the same thing as an artificial external source. So we do need rest, and without rest, we'll get immune compromised. We do need to alter our diet, because your food every day influences every body function. What you eat becomes part of your blood matter and becomes part of your blood fluid. That's the 10 gallons of liquid we carry around in our complete body. It bathes our cells. So when you eat something really sweet, quick example here, if you eat something really sweet, then let's say it's sweet tends to be a little more on the acid side. So if you're taking something that's composed more of acids, the blood doesn't become acid, even though you've taken something strongly acid. What happens in the blood is the blood immediately says, call for minerals, and minerals come flying from bone, from body fluids, from spinal fluid, gallbladder, bile, and all of those minerals become a factor in neutralizing blood acidity. So your blood's always being saved from acid overload, except your blood fluid, your body fluid. That's what bathes your cells. That has different rates of acid and alkaline. So when you take a strong amount of acid, you weaken your mineral base, including minerals like copper, like zinc, and minerals that are selenium, minerals that are really important for immunity. So it's really important to watch our behavior, to watch our diet. A glass of orange juice, which is approximately 75 to 100 grams of sugar, knocks out immunity for 4 to 6 hours. If you're healthy, no big deal. If you're not, you're in trouble, because it means the soldiers have left the fort. That's what it means. You're vulnerable. So it's really, we are influenced by what we eat. We are influenced by how we live. When I hear people talking about immunity, that's the first thing let's look at. Let's look at, let's not just put, let's not take a shower and be filthy and put a tuxedo on. Let's look at really underneath, going underneath the substructure, and let's really change the blood quality. Let's change our health so that we become stronger and unified as an immune being, as opposed to feeling just needing the stimulant, thinking we can use a stimulant. Because you go 3 steps forwards with like taking zinc and 5 steps backwards with your diet. And I don't think people are getting that. And then also, one more thing I want to say, the people that walking around with a gross amount of fear also influences you negatively. That fear also changes your body secretions. That changes your electrolyte imbalance. It has a phenomenal effect on you, which has been documented and proven time and time again. So when I do medical seminars, I talk about all the stats and the references, but in the course of a short radio show, it's boring. So, but it's well known. Does that make sense?
Well, Oh, yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
I've read about the sense of fear actually bringing down your immunity too.
Yes.
But when we intend to strengthen our immunity, the first thought that comes to mind, and the plan that we develop, has to do with our physical resistance to a disease. So
Right.
how to eat right, how to get enough sleep, how to exercise.
Right.
In your books, you write a lot about the emotional aspect of immune health. So could you explain the connection here?
Sure. I got a couple of notes. Let me just refer to what I was thinking about. There's a great quote I love. It's from Ronnie Shakes. He's a comedian. He says, I was going to buy a copy of The Power of Positive Thinking. And then I thought, what the hell good would that do? It's a funny quote because that's the problem. We are thinking negatively. And when we're thinking negatively, it promotes something what's called in medical circles learned helplessness. And learned helplessness has been cited as one of the major reasons behind lowered immunity. It's exposure, it's feeling exposed to things that are uncontrollable. And it's feeling overwhelmed. Like, when you go in a hospital, here's a great example. When you go in a hospital, they tell you when to eat, what to wear, when you're going to rest. They come in at odd times and they give you medications and x-rays and everything they need. You really have no freedom of choice. You really are out of control. And this is what helplessness is, in a sense. That's not to say hospitals are bad for you, but I'm just saying, giving you an example of where you have lost control. You tend to be more victimized in that circumstance. Some people's lives are like that. So my concern is we know also that when one spouse dies, very often if they're really close, within a 13-month period, often that spouse will die as well because of how they're feeling. They're feeling so despondent. They could literally will themselves to die. This is not unheard of. I think also depression, like stress mechanisms, depression is associated with with general changes in your hormonal levels. And that will influence body secretions. People in that state, you drink more alcohol, they have more lack of sleep, more constant worry, they exercise less, they smoke. All of those factors are strongly influencing immunity. So I think on an emotional level, it's not about just keeping positive, because that's a Band-Aid. It's about looking and really running out. What's the biggest fear here? I talked to somebody the other day, and he was telling me, it was an older woman. She was saying, I'm just afraid I'm going to get this. I'm afraid I'm going to get this. And I started talking to her about other things in her life, and I realized that her whole life is a construct to avoid stuff because she's just generally fearful. And no matter what I told her, she just had to say, but I saw the guy in China who died because, she was just going on. And it's frightening. People are really frightened. And you have to work a little bit and process that and run it out. So what if I do get it? Does that mean everybody's going to die if you get it? That's the biggest fear that people go through. I'm going to get it. I'm going to die. Not necessarily. Look at the stats right now. A small percentage of people have died in comparison to the gross amount of people that have diagnosed with it. We haven't seen the end result of that yet, but it doesn't equate to automatically perishing if you have the condition. Complicated in terms of emotionality. It's the steady state of stress in a relationship. Look at the relationship issue now. You're forced to be with your partner in ways that the ways that you haven't before, because the typical paradigm is you go to work, you're away 6 to 7 hours a day, then you take your time with traffic, and then maybe you have a drink or you see some friends. We are spending all of our time with each other right now, and what's going to become mirrored are things that we haven't looked at in the relationship if they're not already clear. So we're going to find ourselves annoyed. We're going to find ourselves upset. What do we do about that? Most people don't have a handle on how to express that. So what they do, they have to get numb. How do you get numb? One of the best ways to get numb is with food. Or food or drink, because this produces the quickest change. After a couple of drinks, you don't care anymore. Everything's everything's tolerable. It's like, she's so crazy. Whereas before, he would just get upset. So It's a systemic thing. It's really deep stuff. But I think the call is to really look at the whole body, mind, spirit. You've got people who are food oriented saying it's all food. You need supplements. You just need this, take that. That's not enough. And then you have the emotional people saying, look, you just have to process it in your head, blah, blah, blah. And then you have the spiritual people who are giving you their philosophy. It's all together. It's all unified. What you need to emphasize in your particular health on your path is where you're weak. So if you've got basically good health and you've got a good sense of the omnipresent, but you don't know how to express your feelings, that might be an area you need to express. If you're expressing your feelings adequately, you have a good sense of the divine with you, but you have a terrible diet, that might be your emphasis area. But I think one of the benefits of looking at all of this, and you have to find meaning in this, otherwise it's depressing, is it's forcing us to relook at our relationship with ourselves, with each other, with our bodies, with our fear levels. And if we don't take advantage of that and really use that to process those things, it's going to become real difficult because we're just going to want to get numb.
Well, I wanted to go back a little bit and ask you about this. You're talking about natural immunity, personal immunity. And while agreeing that natural immunity is better than the acquired one, some experts believe that in the case of COVID-19, natural immunity may not provide adequate protection. What do you think?
I agree. When I hear people saying, you just need these Japanese umeboshi plums or some miso soup and you can get rid, that's really positive thinking, maybe too extreme, and maybe it's not really relative. So I think that natural immunity means your condition on a day-to-day basis and also your constitutional condition. We basically have the health that our parents gave us as our constitution, right? Our structure, our genetics, and then we have what we've done to it. Those are two different aspects. You can have somebody really strong, but they've weakened themselves over the period of years, so suddenly they're more susceptible. So when you say natural immunity, it doesn't mean anything. It's generally speaking, when I hear people say that, it just means that it's a really broad umbrella of what immunity is. Immunity is what you've inherited and what you've done to it to make it either stronger or make yourself more susceptible. So, but there are things that you can do right away to make sure that you have stronger immunity. You want to hear about them?
Yes, please. If you can give us a few practical tips.
Yeah, well, number one is avoid tobacco. If you're still smoking, hello, it's like nobody smokes anymore. Nobody who's really conscious smokes. It's just destructive. Look, I was a smoker in 1970. I mean, I smoked for a little. I thought it was really cool. Like, watch me do smoke rings. It was part of growing up. But at some point, and I was a competitive runner at the time, so I was still smoking. But what it does, it diminishes oxygen levels. It changes blood sugar. It creates toxicity in your system from tar and nicotine. They're caustic alkalis. These factors all depress immunity. So if you're still smoking, hello, 2020. It's not 1950. We don't need it, and you have to work on it.
To get rid of.
It is, and you need support. But there are some addictions that you can wean on, like sugar. You wean on it, go to fruit a little bit, blah, blah, blah. Chocolate, no. You can't just wean on chocolate. That's impossible. You have to just stop chocolate. If you have an addiction to chocolate, you have to stop it. You can't have it near you for a while so that later on you can enjoy it occasionally. But to get more control over an addiction, often, if it's really strong addiction, you have to just completely stop it. Same thing with alcohol. You can't really wean on alcohol. It has to be all or nothing in that regard, and it's the same thing with cigarettes. You can't. You could reduce gradually, but it has such a dramatic influence on the blood sugar, smoking, that when you stop smoking, you will get depressed, you will get tired, because that's your condition. These cigarettes previously kept you hyped up, kept you going, and you don't have a marker of sensitivity until you get off of it. Then you really feel like, wow, smoking, I miss my smoking. Look, it's not agreeing with me. I say, no, it's agreeing with you. This is just your natural condition. It's like people stop sugar eating and they get tired. And I say, of course you're tired. You've depleted yourself. You've been living on stimulants. Most of us are jacked up. We're living on stimulants.
What
You know, it's
about
the sugar.
coffee?
Same thing for coffee. You know, look, if you want to have a cup a day, I don't have a problem with that. But caffeineism is like 3 cups a day. There are so many people taking 3 to 5 cups a day. They're constantly, and the more you take, the more you're going to need. And when you get off of coffee, if your body has to go through the withdrawal process that you go through, then obviously it's something that's not a good, healthy daily food to consume. I love coffee. My father was Cuban and my mother was Russian. I mean, coffee is in our veins. But I recognize how powerful it can be. So it's something you have to treat with a more special attitude, as opposed to getting up and thinking, don't talk to me until I have my coffee. You know, some people get like that. And it's like, you know, it's like, no, you got to work on that addiction, buddy. So caffeine, tobacco, sugar, drama. Some people are drama people. They just always look to create drama. It's like, oh, the UPS guy is coming. I know he's got COVID. You know, you can make yourself crazy. So again, you have to look at what your factor is. But stimulants like tobacco, not good. So that, enough said. Go to bed before midnight. You don't need 8 hours of sleep a day. It's been proven, it's been documented that more than 7 hours of sleep for some people will promote depression. If you have to sleep more than 7.5 hours of sleep, you're either eating late at night, or you're either eating too much at night, or you're eating too much sugar or recreational drugs, which make you lazy. And when you get up in the morning, that's your good state of health. If you get up and you feel awake and alert and like, let's go get the day, good sign, good health. If you get up and you think, another lousy day, then you got a problem. So you need to look at that, because we are a nation of stimulant users, and there's a back and there's a front to stimulant using. It's going to wear you out eventually. It wears out your clarity. Yeah, you know, if you drink coffee, will stay in your blood 10 to 14 hours. You have a cup in the afternoon and say, I don't like to drink it too close to bed. If you have a cup in the afternoon, it's going to, when you lie down at night, your eyes, you're not going to be able to sleep. You're thinking, and that's how you deal with it. And your body deals with it. So yeah, so caffeine is something you need to go really easy on. Sugar, you need to go really easy on. Get to bed before midnight. They've done studies here, an interesting study. When a group of volunteers were denied half of their usual sleep times for a single night, their natural killer cells, which help fight viral infections, which help fight the flu, dropped 30%. And it remained that way until the volunteers were able to get a normal sleep again. Even one night will do that. So rest is important. Rest is really critical. Maintaining and real emotional support of social network and attitude is really important. Making sure, you know, you can, even pet ownership has shown a marked improvement in your immunity. So making sure you have some connection, making sure you're either renewing old friendships or volunteering or doing things that are going to bring you out into the public. You know, when you're with somebody, you get to measure yourself in different ways than when you're alone. You hear things that make you realize, you know, I've never done that. I should do that. Or I don't believe in that. It stimulates your thinking. Just like reading. I love to read, you know, I love to read letters to the editor in different papers, because these are people that are passionate about their opinions. I might not agree with them half the time, but it's great when you see somebody really writing something that really, it's like, you know, that writing just came out in a flow. And that's a real spirited answer, and you can get caught up, and it's very infectious. You don't believe it, you might not buy it, but you can appreciate it. So that's what it does when we have a social social interactions. It really helps us in that regard. You know, we have to find a way. Another issue here is stress. We have to find a way to make stress manageable. The state of no stress, that's called death. So there's always stress. Yeah, but how is it manageable for us? Making sure that it's manageable, and that's the real issue with stress. You know, the real issue is how we react to stress. You know, I see a friend of mine she's hyper stressful. I mean, she has to do things right away, and she'll have like a cappuccino, and then she'll have an espresso, and she'll say, "Oh my God, I got to go to the post office," and it's like you're thinking, like, this is not a national crisis. Why are you getting all excited? Oh, I can't be late. Well, wait a second. Let's stop for a second. What happens if you're late? Well, I won't be able to do something else. Well, maybe that could wait another day. Is it worth walking around in this pent-up, tightened state? You're not present. It's hard to be present when you're in that state. And the value of being present is you can avoid accidents. You can avoid a lot of drama. There are manageable daily relaxation therapies that we could do that will bring us back. Their exercise is critical to move in terms of your immunity. But as far as diet goes, there are like 5 or 6 major diet factors that are really important for immunity. One of them is avoiding alcohol, period. Really getting to the place where you can, that doesn't mean to stop forever. It just means have a period of time where you experiment to find out for yourself how it affects you. That's the self-challenge involved. Alcoholics are known to have more prone to infections, pneumonia. So the idea is to make sure that you can withdraw and stay away from it for a while. You were smiling. What were you thinking?
No, I'm just listening.
Yeah, okay.
Careful.
There's a study of white blood cells showed a severe drop after initial alcohol ingestion. So if you're weak, if you're concerned, that will not help you. Fat intake is really critical because fat will influence, by the fatty acid base, fat will influence your blood, it'll influence your digestion, it influences your fatigue level because fats create a sticky quality of the blood. It's called blood cell aggregation. It makes the blood cells actually stick together. And each blood cell on both sides carries oxygen. So it carries oxygen to the system, and when they clump together, you're missing all that available oxygen. And in studies with hamsters, they showed oxygen reduction in a high-fat diet of about 32%. So 1/3 of their oxygen was tied up because those blood cells were clumped together and the oxygen molecules couldn't get released into the tissue. So high fat is important. Minimizing sugar is important. Let me just say something quickly about sugar here. It takes 3 feet of cane, if we're talking about sugar cane, to produce 1 teaspoon of sugar. That's 3 feet have to be industrially spun, chopped, dyed, ground, put in a centrifuge to actually get 1 teaspoon. Therefore, sugar, refined sugar, is a very concentrated food. Some people will say, well, look, I don't eat refined sugar. I eat evaporated organic cane sugar. So they talk about the quality aspect of sugar. And what I like to say in seminars is, if you're arguing about quality sometimes, it's like saying, you know, Victoria, I like you. I'm going to hit you over the head with a 2x4 piece of wood, but I'm not going to use cheap wood. I'm going to use a really nice pine wood. That's not a consolation. It's still going to hurt. So the quality issue is secondary. I'll see people at a party, they'll come up to me and say, oh, I saw you on that show, or I read your book, and I eat a good diet. And good to most people means it's organic, or I shop at an expensive store, or I go to Whole Foods. That's only quality. The balance factor is more important than anything else. And when it comes to food, that's what you need to understand. So we need to minimize sugars. Sugars mean anything that's sweet. The better source of sugar would be fruit, like fibrous fruits, apples, pears, peaches. Those are berries. They're fibrous, and they slow the passage of sugar into the blood so they don't get a big wave like that. So that means, it doesn't mean you can't eat something sweet. It just means while you're concerned about your sensitivity, until you can build that up, you want to reduce sugar consumption. And also, the more sugar you eat, a lot of people don't understand this, the more animal protein you're going to crave.
True.
And that's one of the things we really need to reduce. I mean, you have experience with that. Right?
Yeah, it's all very true. Can speak of experience and reading and knowledge, and a lot of doctors talk about it. Just listen to Dr. Esselstyn, Dr. Colin Campbell.
Yeah,
Dr. Campbell.
Dr. Campbell did studies with liver toxicity and liver cancer in China for years, and they found any kind of ingestion of animal protein actually predisposed people. Does that mean you have to be vegan? No. It just means the real issue behind meat eating is volume and quantity. Excuse me, same thing. Volume and frequency. That's the real issue. Having it less frequently, and when you do, having less in volume. My father, who was Cuban, told me when they used to eat meat, they'd get some meat. They'd get like a couple of legs of chicken or something. They'd cut it up in small pieces and they'd fry it into the rice or the vegetables. They'd have it as a flavoring. It wasn't like, today's meat day, I'm going to have where's the meat? It wasn't that kind of, I'm a meat and potato. We define ourselves by meat. I'm a meat and potatoes guy. It's not a staple food, has never been, unless you're Eskimo. The Inuit population, they eat more because that's what grows there. So if you choose to eat animal protein in the north, that's suitable for that area. It's going to shorten your life, but that's what you need for the coping of that kind of weather, that kind of fat, that kind of animal. But too much sweet, if you want to reduce your animal protein, too much sweet is going to make you want animal protein. Two other things, and I'll give you the floor here. Whole grains and beans. We need to eat some grain in the diet. Grain acts like a sponge in the body. It bonds to estrogen. It bonds to toxins, takes it out of the body, helps regulate your bowel function. So every day becomes a brilliant day. And in addition to that, it regulates blood sugar. So it keeps you more steady, which means it gives you more endurance. So you have more energy.
And then you'll crave sugar much less.
Thank you. Yeah, that's a good point. If you're more stable, you're not going to be craving a lot of sugar. Some people say, I can never stop eating sugar. Yes, true, based on the way you're currently eating. But if you stop and start to make some dietary changes, you're going to see that it's much easier to stop it. Then also trying new foods. People are so afraid because they don't know, what's that? Why are you making that face? You've never had it. It just looks terrible. All right, well, try it. It's not so bad. They'll try. So what I'm saying is things like the Japanese have an interesting food. It's a cultural food, and it actually appears in a lot of different cultures. They take soybeans. That's a bean, right? They take rice. That's a grain. And they take salt. And they take another strange kind of crinkled rice they may use to make alcohol. It's like a fermented rice. And they cook it together in a big, large vat of water. And after that's cooked, they let it sit. They cook it for a whole day. They let it sit in water, that salted brine, what's about 10% salt. They let it sit there for 2 to 3 years. At this point, usually people are going, ooh. But what happens is it's a brine. It's not rotting. It's fermenting, and it's alkaline fermentation. At the end of 2 years, that water turns black or dark. And when they pour the water off, that becomes a condiment that is called soy sauce. That's how soy sauce traditionally is made. The paste at the bottom, I call it, when I do media, I call it vegetarian beef broth bouillon paste. But what it really is, it's just meat. It's soybeans that are fermented with rice, and it has a beefy taste. That's why I joke and call it beef broth bouillon. It's called miso, as in you make me so happy. And the miso, they use a teaspoon in any kind of soup. You could take like a lentil soup and a teaspoon of miso, you put it in a little cup, take out some of that soup and just dilute it so it's creamy and pour it into the soup. And it's delicious. But what's really cool about it is it has enzymes that help your intestines. It's like a probiotic. It naturally helps the gut bacteria. It has lecithin and linoleic acid, which help dissolve blood fats. It's strengthening. You feel grounded when you take it. So there are a number of cultural foods that have become very popular in the last 50 years. I've been doing this 47 years. So
miso and soy sauce are probably two of the most familiar out of the whole.
Yeah, but again,
new foods.
People use soy sauce. Now, people crave salt because there's sugar intake. The more sugar you want, the more salt you eat. So you take a regular sugar eater, he says, I love Chinese food. I love Japanese food. And they pour the soy sauce all over, and they get really salty. And then they have to have a beer afterwards, and then they feel horrible. They go, maybe once a month at that restaurant. So the truth is, soy sauce is used usually in the cooking. Just a little bit in the cooking, as a flavoring agent, as an alkaline agent, and also as a salt balancer so that the food, it brings out the sweetness of the food. That's ideally how it's used. It's not used at the table like this all over. But those are examples of foods. In Indonesia, there's a food, they take soybeans and they ferment them, and it's called tempeh. It's become very popular in this country. It's like a soybean burger. You can fry it in a tiny bit of oil. You can bake it, and it's really delicious. It's considered a bean product. So these are foods. I mean, we don't eat beans in this country. We don't eat beans because we don't know how to cook them. You say to anybody, eat beans, they're going to say, what? Ugh, I don't think so. I say, I'll peel wallpaper if I eat beans. Because nobody knows how to cook them so that you don't get gas. You know what? If you're really bored, I'll give you a quick Verona recipe. If you're really bored one day and you think, how can I get the worst quality gas? Here's what you do. You make a bean soup, and then you have some fruit juice right after that. That's
or you
good.
cook beans with the fruit juice.
Or you cook bean with, I put the fruit and beans, right? Or have a cheesecake right after. Because what that does is the fruit, being a sugar, ferments the digestion of the bean. So then you have gas. So when you know these things, it's helpful because you feel more in control. We all want to be in control. Why do people drink? Because they know that can relax them. It feels good to know that. I know if I drink this, I'm going to feel this way. Beyond alcohol, beyond other things, that we take for a knowledge of how it's going to make us feel, we don't know the nuances of really how to eat in a way to produce more energy. What happens if you eat grain every day? You'll have a bowel movement. Yeah, if you're a person that doesn't have bowel movements, you're going to predispose yourself at some point, potentially, to colon cancer. Because the bowel is just sitting there fermenting dioxycholic acid. There's all kinds of acids that are being produced. Not good. So what grain does is it helps you go to the bathroom. It creates a 24-hour bowel cycle where within 24 hours you'll have a bowel movement. Right there, no matter where you are on the spot. No, it won't happen like that. But the point is, it'll foster better bowel movement. Okay, so that idea of control is important. You can have more, I tell people, you can have much more control than you're aware that you have currently. And that's really great, creates a good feeling of independence. Another thing is overeating. We don't realize how much we overeat. If you bend down and you cup water at a stream, like that little stream behind you, it would wash me away. But if I was able to, we do this with our hands, right? We scoop the water up. Well, that scooping here, that's the size of your stomach. Just put your hands together like that. That's your stomach. So look at that. And then look at your plate. And you'll think, wow, looks like I have two stomachs with that plate. Because
You're lucky because you have bigger hands.
Well, that just means I have a bigger stomach, I guess. but the point I'm making is that we don't need to fill up completely. But sometimes I'll see pictures on the internet, especially on the natural food sites, where people are showing the dish they made. And you see, the first thought is like, wow, that's a lot of food. You have a bowel movement for an hour with that plate. So it's really important to make sure that you're watching your volume. You'll have much more energy if you do. Overeating, that's considered overeating. And the last thing is allowing time to digest your food. Most people will eat and then they'll go to bed very soon thereafter. You know what that does? It makes you dream more. And you know why that's not a good idea? Because it'll make you have more shallow sleep. You don't feel rested. When you get up, you still feel tired.
And then you make up for it with coffee or stimulants or more.
Then you need exactly. Then you need a stimulant. You have to have a stimulant. So, the work of immunity is not magically, I'm going to take, and there are some supplements that can help you. There's maitake mushroom. It's a great supplement. It actually will enhance immunity. There's dandelion. There's ginseng. Panax ginseng is great for enhancing immunity. There's a number of things. Golden seal, there's garlic. There are a number of things that actually can, echinacea, used for short periods of time. There are a number of things we know can enhance immunity. But before you go enhancing immunity, first stop weakening immunity. First stop weakening it. And that's the real message here. Will that protect you from COVID? I don't know if it'll protect, well, I know it'll protect you, but your exposure is what's going to make a difference. So if you're really exposed, that's another concern. And from what I hear, it stays in the air for 2 to 3 hours. COVID, it'll live on plastic for 4 to 6 hours, I believe. Metal longer. I was at the bank the other day, and I put my gloves on to go to the bank, and I put a mask on because there were a bunch of people there. I went to the ATM, and I was thinking, I got to take the card out of my wallet. I put it in here, and then now I've put it in the machine. Who knows who's been touching the machine? Maybe some virus jumped on. Hey, here comes Verne's card. Let's jump on it. And maybe it was full of. And then I put it in my wallet. And then the navigation of figuring out how you take your gloves off, how you do this. Do I bring the mail inside or do I open it outside? Do I get rid of my gloves? It can make you crazy. And I understand they're all precautions, but that precaution should be based on where you are and what the curve is looking like. And we have to stay involved in the news. What's happening right now in Georgia, as an example, is a concern because they're opening up everything pretty early when they still have a high curve. Yep. So that's a concern, especially things like, being in tight areas with people where your exposure is close.
However you try to follow all the precautions, you can't hide from this.
No, you can't. You can't hide.
But you can work at strengthening your own immunity.
You can, and also what will save you is a positive frame of mind that's determined to make sure you don't allow it to weaken you in your mind. You don't fear so much, because I know I have less fear in my own life about stuff like that because I've managed to see over the years how I could make a difference and how I could develop a sensitivity to know what matters sometimes. So when I have clients that have extreme fears, I'm very sympathetic because I understand that. They don't have the experience of knowing they could change their health. And that's why it's really important to experiment a little bit, to learn how to cook and not be so dependent on opening a box and I hope the microwave will work. I mean, we need to learn these simple skills. I'm working on a movie right now. We're shooting in the fall about kids that cook. And my friend of mine teaches kids at ages 6 to 10 years old how to cook in schools. He goes into schools with grants, and it's fascinating. These kids learn how to cook. They go home and they start cooking, and then the parents say, well, maybe I should learn how to do that. And they start enjoying the food, and then they start coming and saying, how can I learn to do this, And it's such a switch because if you want to really change children's health, you have to change parental health because they make the rules and they're influenced. But I just think the whole thing right now is like, what chance do you have of bettering your immunity? You have a good chance of bettering it. Will it help your odds? I believe it will. To what degree? Nobody knows. Nobody can say. But if it's going to help at all, it's going to be relevant.
We just have to apply a reasonable effort to do that.
Yeah, I think so. The takeaway here is that we need to make some changes in our own lives, not only with the way we're eating, but how we think. Our perceptions influence us dramatically. Being negative, being extremely judgmental, forgetting gratitude. All of these factors influence us. They influence how we think. Blaming others all the time. Blame. We need to take some accountability and say, well, what he did was not great, but I put myself in that position to be on the receiving end. I should have had better judgment about where to go or what to do. We have to find some way that we're more accountable as opposed to blaming, because blaming doesn't go anywhere. And when you see somebody who doesn't take any responsibility, who refuses to accept any kind of accountability on something, that's not a healthy person. It's not. Because behind that is great fear. And I'm convinced that people who are in that condition have very limited lifespans and very limited sense of happiness. You're not here very long. I mean, 3.2 billion years supposedly we've taken to evolve. Well, we're 80, 90 years. What is that? It's nothing. Gone. I used to have a teacher used to say, we have come from the infinite. We're on the earth 70, 90 years, and then we go back to the infinite. I talked to a woman in the market the other day, and she was limping, and we started talking about her limp, and somehow we got into the conversation. I found out she's diabetic. I made a film in 2006. I directed a movie about people who were reversing diabetes with diet. We took people who were eating terrible, just standard Western diet. We put them on a grain, bean, and vegetable diet, and within 10 days, mostly all the people who were type 2 got off. Some of them were taking up to 100 units of insulin a day. And they were told, you'll never get off your insulin. You'll always be on insulin. So they were shocked they can get off insulin as an adult. Now, childhood diabetic type 1, more difficult because the pancreas is virtually dysfunctional. But you can also bring down their need for insulin a little bit as well. But when you see you can do stuff like that, so I told her, I said, without getting too heavy, I just said, there are ways that you can increase your circulation. You don't have to have claudication or retinopathy or any of the conditions that come along with diabetes. There are things that you can do. And she said, oh, yeah, but I can't cook. I can't do. Everything she said was like really negative. And I said, I think your real disease is optimism here. And she laughed and she said, my husband says that all the time. I can't stand him either. So some people you got to leave alone. They're not willing to change. But you can change. And you could see real positive aspects in when you do. And that's fun. What a feeling it is to know that you can make some changes. So I think this whole thing that's happening, the way to give it meaning and the scale is to say, this is a great call for me to have some time to actually learn more about health, to experiment. Maybe I can cook a little bit. Maybe I can see if I can eliminate things I thought I could never eliminate. You can knock your food bill down by at least a third, if not half. And I see positive aspects from that all the time. So yeah, I think people can definitely benefit.
Thank you, Verne.
I hope that's
Most
helpful.
importantly, it's very helpful. All these great suggestions and health points, and it's important. But most importantly, you know how to make people more positive, more optimistic, and you know how to inspire. So I know it from the personal experience.
Thank you. And I think if you're listening to this out there, you heard a lot of different stuff, and I think that the gist is that you can make changes and you could benefit, and it doesn't have to be as bleak as you think it is. That's what I want people to walk away with, as opposed to trying to remember every detail. I talk about it in my books. You can get my book. You can get there are other books. There are other great books. There are great links. I know, Victoria, you're still teaching cooking, aren't you?
Still do.
Yeah, so cooking classes, you've got great resources there where you are. So I would really encourage people to do as much as you can now and find out for yourself. I see 6 to 10-year-old kids now changing their diets, not eating sugar, finding that a fruit smoothie will do it. And they're feeling better. They know from their experience. A little kid said to me in a workshop one day, he said, I like this food because I poo-poo better. It was amazing to hear that. I said, really? He said, yeah. And he started describing it. He was really into it because, he said, it's no problem. I just sit down and it comes right out. And then I get up and I'm done. I said, what happened before? He said, I used to sit there forever. He was like 7, 8 years old. I said, that's good. That's very good. So it's cool. It's to have that experience and to know you can change body functions. You can make things easier, spend less time in the bathroom. When I go to the bathroom and I see people have like books in the bathroom, I get scared because that means they spend a lot of time in the bathroom. So that's another diagnostic, Anyway, thank you for asking me. I hope everybody finds a way to experiment a little more and to find that as a real happy and positive experience.
Thank you, Verne. This was very informational. And you, dear friends, please stay positive, take care of your health, eat right, learn how to cook well, how to take care of yourself, take care of your needs, and we'll see you soon. Goodbye.